Imagine this: you walk into a room filled with strangers. The air hums with unspoken energy. A man in the corner laughs, but the laugh feels hollow, rehearsed. A woman across the table folds her arms tightly, though the room isn't cold. Two colleagues exchange glances so brief you'd miss them if you blinked, yet something passes between them. An entire story condensed into half a second of eye contact. And here's the unsettling question: how much of what you believe about people is real, and how much is a projection of your own blindness? We live in a world obsessed with words, yet words are the weakest evidence of truth. Words can lie, can misdirect, can mask the raw currents of thought and emotion beneath them. But the body is a traitor. It leaks truth in the smallest twitch of an eyebrow, the fleeting curve of a lip, the unconscious tilt of a torso leaning toward desire or away from threat. To read people like a book, as Patrick King suggests, is not merely a trick of social skill. It is a philosophical act, a rebellion against illusion. Consider this paradox. People spend their lives trying to hide their vulnerabilities, yet the very act of hiding exposes them. The businessman who insists too loudly on his success reveals insecurity. The friend who maintains perfect composure in grief may betray sadness in the faint tension of her jaw. The colleague who brags of loyalty lets slip disloyalty in the way his eyes dart when questioned. Truth is never locked away. It is scattered, waiting to be collected by the attentive observer. But why does this matter? Why should one learn to decipher these subtle codes? Because life itself is negotiation. Every relationship, whether with a lover, a parent, a stranger, or an enemy, is built not on what is said, but on what is meant. And what is meant is written across the body in living ink. Patrick King argues that reading people is not a mystical gift, but a discipline. It is about learning to recognize patterns, contradictions, micro-expressions, and silent cues. It is about sharpening perception to pierce through the fog of performance. In a sense, to master this art is to arm yourself against deception, whether from others or from your own hopeful imagination. But let us not treat this as a mere toolkit for manipulation. The ability to see into another human being carries a heavier weight. If you can read people truly, then you are forced to confront truths that may be inconvenient. The betrayal that is already underway, the love that is unspoken yet undeniable, the insecurity hidden beneath arrogance. You will find that most masks are fragile, and most humans ache for understanding. This power, then, is double-edged. To read another person is to know them, and to know them is to hold responsibility. Do you confront them? Do you protect them? Do you exploit them? The answer will reveal not just who they are, but who you are. As Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, all things are subject to interpretation. Whichever interpretation prevails at a given time is a function of power and not truth. When you learn to read people like a book, you hold the power of interpretation. The question is whether you will use it to illuminate or to dominate. And so, the journey begins not with learning tricks but with awakening awareness. The ink is already there. The pages are already open. The only question is, will you read them? Picture for a moment that every person you meet carries an invisible instrument. Together, in a crowded room, they form an orchestra of silent music. Some play staccato, sharp, defensive gestures. Others move in legato, fluid, open, trusting motions. Each shift of posture, each flicker of gaze, is a note in a symphony. The tragedy is that most people walk through life deaf to this music. They hear only words, and so they miss the deeper melody that reveals who people really are. The body does not ask for permission to speak. It speaks relentlessly, regardless of what the mouth says. A clenched fist hidden beneath a table. A microsecond's flash of contempt curling one corner of the lip. A heartbeat quickening in the pulse at the throat when certain names are mentioned. The body keeps betraying its owner. And this is why Patrick King insists that reading people is about cultivating radical attention. It is about training the mind to notice what others dismiss as noise. Take posture, for instance. A person leaning forward may signal interest, but combine it with tightly crossed arms and you find not openness, but cautious curiosity. Similarly, the smile, a gesture so often mistaken for sincerity, is one of the easiest lies to tell. But a smile that reaches the eyes, where tiny wrinkles burst into existence, cannot be counterfeited without effort. To the trained observer, the difference between performance and authenticity is glaring. Yet there's danger here, the temptation to oversimplify. Some think body language is a dictionary where each gesture equals a fixed definition. Crossed arms equals defensiveness. Shifting eyes equals dishonesty. Nothing could be further from the truth. Context is everything. A woman hugging herself may not be rejecting you. She may simply be cold. A man tapping his foot may not be impatient. Perhaps he is anxious or excited. Reading people is not decoding ciphers, it is interpreting symphonies. This is why it demands patience. To truly read someone, you must look not at isolated signals but at clusters, at the interplay between voice, body, and silence. Imagine you're watching a play. You wouldn't judge the story by a single line of dialogue. You'd watch the gestures, the stage direction, the pauses, the tension between characters. Humans in conversation are no different, and here lies the emotional burden. Once you begin to hear this silent orchestra, you cannot unhear it. You will see lies when others are convinced of truth. You will notice insecurity behind laughter, resentment behind politeness, attraction hidden behind avoidance. The world becomes noisier, but also clearer. You may even feel, at times, that you carry a knowledge too heavy for casual use. But isn't that precisely what makes it powerful? To read people is to awaken to the reality that authenticity is rare and that every interaction is layered. Pushes you to act with more compassion, for you see the wounds others try to conceal. It also sharpens your defenses, for you recognize manipulation before its claws sink in. The philosopher Epictetus once observed, "Nature gave us one tongue and two ears, so we could hear twice as much as we speak." Perhaps the same truth applies to the body. It gave us two eyes to see what words attempt to disguise. Most ignore this gift. The few who do not, the ones who train themselves to listen with eyes as much as ears, become conductors of the silent orchestra. This is the deeper promise of Patrick King's work, not just to decode others, but to learn to live with eyes wide open, in a world where nothing truly remains hidden. There are storms inside people, but unlike thunder that rumbles across the sky, these storms flash for only a fraction of a second, barely perceptible unless your eyes are trained to catch them. These are micro-expressions, fleeting, involuntary eruptions of truth that surface before the mind has time to edit them away. Imagine this: you ask a friend how they're doing. They smile warmly and insist, "I'm fine." Yet in the blink of an eye, before the smile hardens into place, you catch the ghost of sadness flicker across their face. Eyebrows pulled together, lips trembling downwards. A lightning bolt of grief that vanishes so quickly most would miss it. But you didn't, and in that moment, you've glimpsed their unguarded soul. Patrick King emphasizes that micro-expressions are the purest form of emotional leakage. Because they happen so fast, sometimes as little as 1/25th of a second, they bypass conscious control. The body betrays the truth, then swiftly covers it with performance. To read them is not only to see beyond masks, but to realize that every human being lives in constant negotiation between what they feel and what they permit the world to see. There are 7 universal micro-expressions, mapped by psychologists: happiness, sadness, fear, anger, surprise, disgust, and contempt. Each has its signature: the slight tightening of eyelids, the wrinkling of the nose, the corner of a lip raised in scorn. And though cultures may differ in language or gesture, these micro-expressions remain universal, rooted in biology itself. They are the closest thing we have to emotional fingerprints. But here lies the subtlety. Recognizing them is not enough. You must learn to contextualize them. A flash of anger does not always mean hostility toward you. It could be frustration at oneself or at a remembered event. A flicker of fear may not mean dishonesty, but perhaps vulnerability. To wield this knowledge wisely, one must resist jumping to conclusions. The truth is in the pattern, not the single spark. Consider the moral weight of such awareness. Once you begin noticing these lightning flashes, you will understand people differently. not as stable beings but as fragile contradictions. The confident boss who inspires fear in meetings may betray insecurity with a half-second grimace when questioned. The lover who swears indifference may flash longing before disguising it as disdain. You will see the brokenness behind arrogance, the tenderness behind coldness, and you will know things you are not always meant to know. This is both blessing and curse. For what do you do when you see suffering someone refuses to confess? Do you confront them and risk their denial? Or do you quietly carry the weight of a truth they wish to bury? Reading people deeply demands not just skill but moral courage. And perhaps this is why micro-expressions unsettle us. They reveal that truth is never far from the surface. No matter how artful the mask, the body protests, the soul leaks, the storm flashes. To train your eyes for these moments is to walk through life with heightened sensitivity, constantly aware that every human interaction is layered with unspoken depths. As the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard wrote, "The truth is a trap. You cannot get it without it getting you. You cannot get the truth by capturing it, only by being captured by it." Micro-expressions are precisely this kind of trap. They seize you, force you to see reality, and refuse to let you remain naive. The question is, are you ready to live with that level of vision? There is a dangerous arrogance in believing you can read people by memorizing a catalog of gestures. The truth is subtler, darker. Human beings are not dictionaries. They are labyrinths. To walk through their signals without understanding context is like hearing half a conversation and thinking you know the whole story. Consider contradiction. A politician proclaims unity, yet his body leans away from the very audience he claims to embrace. A partner insists she trusts you, but her pupils constrict when you mention certain names. A colleague congratulates you with words, yet his jaw tenses and his lips press tight. What do we believe, the words or the body? Patrick King insists we believe the contradiction itself. For contradiction is the birthplace of truth. It is in these fissures, where speech and body collide, that intention reveals itself. People rarely lie perfectly. The mask may be polished, but the cracks show if you look closely enough. The dissonance between language and behavior is a silent confession. Yet, interpretation is treacherous. A contradiction does not always mean deception. Sometimes it means conflict within the person, a struggle between what they feel and what they wish to feel, between duty and desire. A man may say he is happy in his career, while his body betrays boredom. Is he lying? Or is he clinging to the story he needs to believe in order to survive? To read people responsibly is to recognize not only deception but also self-delusion. Context sharpens the lens. A gesture in isolation is meaningless. Crossed arms at a funeral are different from crossed arms in a boardroom. Nervous laughter at a wedding differs from nervous laughter at a job interview. The setting, the stakes, the history of the person, these are the soil from which signals grow. Without context, the reader becomes blind, mistaking shadows for substance. This is why the art of reading people demands humility. It is not enough to see. You must interpret carefully, aware of your own biases. How many friendships have been destroyed because someone assumed malice when there was only misunderstanding? How many lovers have accused betrayal when the real culprit was fear? To read without wisdom is to become a tyrant of perception. But when used well, this awareness becomes liberating. You begin to notice not just when people are lying to you, but when they are lying to themselves. You see the coworker who insists she is fine, yet trembles at her desk every morning. You recognize the friend who says he's moved on, yet winces at the mention of an old flame. You detect the quiet courage of the introvert who hides his strength behind silence. And sometimes, in the contradiction, you find compassion. The realization that most humans are not villains, but prisoners of their own masks. This insight changes not only how you see others, but how you see yourself. For once you recognize the cracks in other people's performances, you cannot help but notice your own. The way you force a smile when exhausted. The way you nod in agreement when your heart rebels. The way your words and body fracture into contradiction. Reading others becomes inevitably reading yourself. The philosopher Heraclitus once said, "Character is destiny." But perhaps we must add, Character is revealed in contradiction. The shadows we cast, the slips we cannot control, the inconsistencies between intention and action, they are not accidents. They are the outlines of who we truly are. And so, to read people is to wander not only through their labyrinths, but through your own. There comes a moment in every serious student of human nature when the exhilaration of reading people gives way to unease. At first, the ability feels like a superpower, the thrill of catching what others miss, of glimpsing unspoken truths in a flicker of the eye or a subtle tension in the jaw. But the deeper you go, the heavier the knowledge becomes. For what do you do when you see more than you wish to see? Imagine sitting across from a friend who insists she is happy in her marriage. Her words are steady, her tone convincing. Yet, in her micro-expressions, you catch the unmistakable shadow of fear. Do you confront her? Do you allow her the dignity of her silence? Or do you silently carry the burden of knowing she is not safe? To read people is to be thrust into ethical dilemmas where silence and speech are both fraught with consequence. Patrick King does not frame this skill as a weapon but as a mirror that reflects not only others but yourself. To wield the ability without conscience is to turn it into manipulation, a way to exploit vulnerabilities and engineer outcomes. But to use it with wisdom is to deepen empathy, to extend compassion, to guide relationships toward honesty. The choice is yours, and yet here lies the paradox. The more you see, the lonelier you may feel. Others float on the surface of words, content with illusions. You, however, see beneath. You see when someone is smiling while breaking inside. You see when praise is laced with jealousy. You see when anger hides love, when love hides fear. You become aware that most human interaction is theater, and you sit in the audience knowing the actors are not their roles. Such clarity can isolate you, but perhaps isolation is the price of insight. For to truly know others, you must surrender the comfort of ignorance. The world becomes richer, yes, but also more complex, more tragic, more raw. And this complexity is the soil of maturity. To read people like a book is not to strip them of their mystery, but to recognize that every page is written in layers, some meant to be shared, others meant to be endured in silence. The responsibility then is not just perception but restraint. You do not announce every truth you see. You do not expose every mask. Sometimes wisdom is in letting others keep their illusions until they are ready to face them. Sometimes mercy is silence. And yet, there will be moments when your perception is a gift that saves. You notice the despair in a colleague before it consumes him. You sense the fear in a child before she finds the words to name it. You catch the dishonesty of a deal before it ruins you. In those moments, your ability to read people is no longer a private burden but a public good. The philosopher Simone once said, "Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity." To read people is, at its highest form, precisely this act of generosity. It is giving someone the gift of being seen, not as they pretend to be, but as they are. It is offering understanding where the world offers indifference. And so the journey ends where it began, with a question. When you read people like a book, what kind of reader will you be? Will you skim for advantage, plundering the margins for leverage? Or will you read with reverence, treating each person as a fragile manuscript written in ink that cannot be erased? The choice defines not only how you see others, but who you become in the act of seeing. For in the end, reading others is never just about them, it is about you.